All right. Welcome back to In Sessions, Artist Foundations in the 21st Century here at the Art Students League. Once again, my name is Sam Sackeroff. I'm the gallery director and curator. As those of you who joined us this morning know, this symposium addresses artist foundations. In the last few decades, the Artist Foundation has taken its place alongside the Art Gallery, Art Museum, Art Fair, Art Auction House, and indeed the Art School is one of the sort of pivotal pieces of infrastructure on which the larger art world depends. And we're delighted that so many of you have joined us to consider the role of the Artist Foundation and how it has emerged and how it is changing to address new concerns in the 21st century. Our first panel this morning focused on practical aspects of the Artist Foundation, including things like managing dedicated exhibition and archival sites, facilitating exhibitions, managing scholarship. And then our second panel, which is just about to begin, broadens our focus somewhat to consider philanthropy, social activism, and community engagement. These are endeavors that in some ways exceed the scope of the art world narrowly defined, but in other ways actually sketch its horizons. So we're especially excited to those of you who have joined us for the second panel. And as was the case this morning, to address these issues, we're joined by a fantastic group of panelists and a fantastic moderator. I'll run through them now. We're joined by Justin Brancato, who is the inaugural executive director of the Toshiko Takaezu Foundation and has served as the deputy director and director of archives at the Roy Lichtenstein Foundation since 2010. Brancato's career at the Roy Lichtenstein Foundation followed roles at the Smithsonian Institution, at the Archives of American Art, and the Armand Studio. And at the Roy Lichtenstein Foundation, Brancato spearheaded critical initiatives, including the processing and digitization of a 500 linear foot archive, collaborating on the publication of the artist's catalog raisonné, a subject that we heard a little bit about this morning, and working with colleagues to establish permanent art collections and projects with institutions such as the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Ohio State University, the Getty Research Institute, and the Centre Pompidou. Solana Chehtman is Director of Artist Programs at the Joan Mitchell Foundation. A curator and cultural producer based in New York, originally from Argentina, Chehtman was also inaugural Director of Creative Practice and Social Impact at The Shed. Previously, she has worked as Vice President of Public Engagement at Friends of the High Line, and since arriving in New York in 2012, she's collaborated with a range of cultural institutions, including Creative Time, the New Museum, the Queens Museum, and the Tribeca Film Institute. Mikiko is president and director of the nonprofit art center KinoSaito. Ino was born in Japan, where she established the fashion buying and consulting company LLJ USA Inc. in 1990. She then moved to New York, where she continued to work in the fashion industry, collaborating with well-known designers, including Jason Wu and Oscar de la Renta. In 2007, Ino met and later married the artist and Art Students League alumnus KinoSaito. And following Saito's death in 2016, Ino founded KinoSaito in 2018, while continuing her work in the fashion industry while also managing her late husband's studio and estate. And James Merle Thomas is an interdisciplinary curator and scholar and the inaugural deputy director of the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation. Thomas previously served as executive director at the Resnick Center for Herbert Bayer Studies at the Aspen Institute, assistant professor of art history at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University, and as provost postdoctoral fellow at the University of Southern California. And between 2003 and 2013, he worked with the late great curator and critic Okui Enwezor on major large-scale group shows, including the second Seville Biennial in 2006, the seventh Gwangju Biennial in 2008, and the third Paris Triennial in 2012. And once again, we are delighted to be joined by today's moderator, Phong Bui. In addition to being the co-founder, publisher, and artistic director of the Brooklyn Rail, Phong is an artist, writer, independent curator, and former curatorial advisor for MoMA's PS1. Phong has been a board trustee of the International Association of Art Critics, Anthology Film Archives, Studio in a School, and the Center for Fiction, among many other organizations, and he has served on the advisory boards of many more, including Art Oh My Pavilions, Denniston Hill, Floating Forest, and Sky Farms. He has been a senior critic in the MFA programs at Yale, Columbia, and the University of Pennsylvania, and has received numerous awards, including, as I mentioned this morning, the prestigious American Academy of Arts and Letters Award for Distinguished Service in the Arts in 2021. And finally, before I hand the mic over, I'd just like to again welcome and thank all of our sponsors, including the Brooklyn Rail, and also to encourage you all to stick around after the panel for the launch of 150 Stories, which is a groundbreaking anthology celebrating the League's 150th anniversary. That'll take place in this room at 4:30, and we'd encourage you all to stay and raise a glass with us. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming again Phong Bui.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. I mean, you survived this morning 2 hours long, took a quick lunch break for an hour, and come right back. That's terrific. Well, I mentioned Alexis de Tocqueville briefly from the beginning, and I didn't want to elaborate then, but now I may, if you don't mind, I wanted to say a few things about him. I don't know whether because the French colonization was in Vietnam for 200 years, or nearly 200 years, so I grew up with a very severely French influence, history and literature and everything else in between. But Tocqueville, as you remember, was sent here in 1831 for 9 months to study the American penal system. He came here with his friend, Gustave de Beaumont, and it's very interesting to point out that his parents, his family, he was haunted as a child growing up, knowing that almost all the members of the family were guillotined by the French Revolution. His parents was barely escaped by a day after Robespierre was beheaded. So he understood the fact when he came here, he was ecstatic to discover that somehow the America is different. America, where the so-called party of liberty can be a friend with party of religion. And it's so interesting. He says something that is stuck, I'm paraphrasing now, but he said, I have a passionate love for liberty, law, and rights. I'm neither belong to the Revolutionary Party nor the conservative. I am, most of all, committed to liberty, but deep down in the human heart, there's a depraved craving for equality, which compels the weak to bring down the strong to their level, by which impels them in the servitude of equality in the name of freedom. So it's very complex, isn't it? So what does that mean? We tend to forget. I'm reminding all of us again. It means that the 50%, at least in American equivalent of the French Revolution, was that it belonged solely to the party of the left, the 50%, which is the Equality Party, the party of equality. The other 50% belong to the tyranny of the minority, which is the party of liberty. So it's very complex. When he came, he realized, having met Andrew Jackson very soon after he arrived in Washington, D.C., 1931, he immediately was very unimpressed by Jacksonian America, by the level of aggression, by the commitment to elevate the common man, to start from the top down. And you have to remember, it was the same time when transcendentalism was beginning to take shape. It's important that we remember that. we have to remember before Emerson or Thoreau began to formulate with Margaret and Fuller and the whole transcendental movement, it was based on that oppressive measure, that how it was created. So again, I thought about this deeply because he made terrific observation. There was, oh my God, 93 chapters in the 2 volumes. The first volume was published in 1835, and the second was 1840. And it's my 3rd time reading it now, so I can cite a certain chapter. Maybe after the panel, we can talk further. But why was he so taken by America? Why was so impressed? He was so, I would say, in love with the idea of common people, average people. None of those were born from aristocratic background. And they come together. They come together, they create what is now called the art of association. I recoined it, the art of joining, in the Brooklyn Rail. He was impressed that however complex the Pilgrims were, by the way, they're not the Puritans. They are, one is a separatist who denounced from the Church of England, you remember? And the other one wanted to reform from within. So there was mediation between the two. They are complex. I just finished not long ago, 3 weeks ago, I think, reading for the first time The Scarlet Letter. I've seen the movie. But reading it is something else altogether. And you understood immediately the lyrical power and the insightful observation of Hawthorne, and how he corresponded back and forth with Melville is another story of that fragility. But what is so important for me to observe, to learn, is the art of joining, that people come together, build bridges, they build school, they create all kind of associations, helping each other out. In fact, the word philanthropy was more or less invented by them. It's called, of course, philanthropy is to love people, just like philosophy is to love wisdom. And they created philanthropy with the emphasis of moral and religious obligation to give back. They want to give back. You know, they're very complex religious people, as I described, the left and the right leaning back and forth. But the commitment to philanthropy is incredible. It's so profoundly ingrained in that beginning of America. So I think the art of joining is a very important component, as not that inseparable from what he also referred as self-interest rightly understood. It's only when you come together, you collaborate, you exchange ideas, and you implement some kind of push force to the communal needs, that it will in return, that your self-interest is gained from that broader interest. So that's very profound. The art of joining or the art of association, self-interest rightly understood. The two together was so essential. If you, I don't know how many of you have read that great book, came out in 1990. It's called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, the great Harvard professor who wrote that book based on the discovery between the two opposing ideology. One is called social bonding capital, which is very inherent, very natural, that you tend to create alliances, friendship with people who look like you, who come from the same background as you. It's very insular, by the way. It's more or less sustaining just to stay afloat. Can you imagine young men, young, angry, frustrated German men after the Versailles Treaties in Germany, easily exploited by Hitler? Not that different today, is it? Frustrated, white, angry men everywhere in America? So the other is called bridging social capital, which is essential. We all have to try, make a great effort to know each other. He doesn't look like me. He doesn't look like me either. So that's the thing. How can we break that barrier? Reaching out to the people that we aspire to know, to learn from. This is why I dedicate this afternoon again to Aggie Gunn's vision of the studio in the school, teaching children from pre-K to high school, from underserved community in Manhattan and the 5 boroughs, how to deploy art education to their own facilitation or nourishment of inner freedom. Children, when they make art, they don't censor themselves. And as we get older, can we maintain that innocence or retrieve that innocence, that inner freedom? So to that front, I would like to say that this afternoon is about Artist Foundation with the emphasis of philanthropy. How to give back and what ways can the given be more effectively visible and productive. So I thought it would be nice if I was to ask each of our friends here to give, I don't know, 2-3 minutes haiku description of what that means.
You're serious about that?
Well, I'm serious about it, yeah, but you know, haiku's good, don't get it wrong. Haiku's good, it's like a cherry blossom, must not be jealous of an oak tree. So anyway, I thought it'd be nice if start with you, Justin, and we'll spring forth that way, the direction.
Okay, not much of a haiku person, so I'll be brief though. I'll try.
You must.
Hello, my name is Justin Brancato, and thank you and Sam and the Art Students League for doing this. I'm the Deputy Director at the Lichtenstein Foundation, and here's a photograph of Roy. It was established, Roy died in 1997, it was established in 1998. We worked for 25 years to support the art and artists of Roy's time. Dorothy Lichtenstein, so Roy Lichtenstein didn't endow the foundation himself. It was really an estate mechanism of Dorothy Lichtenstein. And Dorothy was really adamant about wanting the foundation just to function for Roy Lichtenstein. She had her own philanthropy. She was interested in stem cell research, education, studying the school was something very important to her, and we still do programs with them. That one just concluded this summer. But Roy was all about Roy. So we had, I see Andrea Tal is here and her colleagues who had conducted an amazing catalog raisonné. We did over 250 oral histories. We did exhibitions, little known parts of his career, and processed and digitized an archive. But it wasn't until we decided to maybe create a study center. This was maybe about 10 years ago, and we spent 2 years working on that study center to create like an entity in perpetuity. And then after 2 years of that process, Dorothy was like, no. Like, Roy wouldn't want this. This is not what we're going to do, drawing down 5% for the rest of our lives. No. So what happened was we decided to sunset, and ever since we've been doing a lot more philanthropic giving to the Archives of American Art, trying to help digitize collections, $5 million for underrepresented artists. We worked with HCBUs in the Atlanta Consortium, worked with the Aspen Institute, things along those lines. So like things that we wouldn't have done if we just decided to keep a full staff. It was originally like a 2-location deal, East Coast, Midwest, and now we're just spending down our money, and what Roy really believed in was institutions. So this is not short, I apologize.
Not at all, please.
And so that's Roy in his studio in the West Village on Washington Street. Picture of the exterior, which is gone. Oh, there it is, yes. And Dorothy Lichtenstein, who passed away last year, who really had a heart of gold and was our shining star. And so that's where we stand now. We're 2 years away from sunsetting, and then we're going to move on from there. Now, on the flip side is a much smaller foundation, which is the Toshiko Takaezu Foundation, which I'm the inaugural executive director. And we have a little bit different history. We started in 2015 with just a board that was led by apprentices and friends. And it took a little while to get started. So it's always the idea of when an artist passes, Toshiko decided to donate her work herself to museums. She donated the archive to the Archives of American Art. And she didn't really plan a foundation. It was only years later when the studio and a large collection of works were in Quakertown, which is where her studio was in New Jersey, and then a foundation was started. And it wasn't only until years later when we reintegrated with the family, we brought on professionals like Jeff Munger from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Darlene Fukuji, who is the grandniece, and we really started to plan exhibitions with the Noguchi retrospective that happened last year, and now we're doing a strategic plan. And so I was the first paid employee. We don't really even have a location now. Like, my office is wherever I am, so this is my office right now. Thank you for coming. But she was an amazing abstract expressionist sculptor and ceramicist. She made these wonderful, large, closed forms. She's highly underrepresented in the fine art world. She is, of course, very well known in the craft world. And we really do believe in her and her vision. She really believed in a balance of life. And I feel like this is an important message right now, where she believed in gardening. She put it on with equal weight to making food, dinner, and making art. It was the same thing to her. And she often did these things and had people over, and she engaged with people, and people weren't using their phones. We weren't getting obsessed with things like that. So she's someone that's very important to us. We're building a foundation. It feels like it's a new phase of the foundation. I think I've said enough for now. So.
Well, thank you so much, Justin. Solana?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Solana Chehtman, and I'm the Director of Artist Programs at the Joan Mitchell Foundation. And, I wanted to start a little bit. I hope you all know about Joan Mitchell, but if you don't, she would be 100 years today. She was born in 1925, and we are actually celebrating her centennial throughout the whole year. I'll talk a tiny bit about that in a second. She was born in Chicago. She lived a lot here in New York. Then she moved to Paris and finally to Béthune, a tiny town in France, where she passed away in the 90s. And I was telling someone that I made a little text in these slides. So if you are interested, you can take pictures. But I wanted to tell you more about her and who she was. And there's actually a beautiful documentary by Marion Cajori on our website that you can take a look at. It definitely shows who she was and her personality and her work. She was an abstract expressionist painter. She loved poetry and nature, and definitely nature was where she got a lot of her inspiration, but she actually closed all the windows because she was like, I cannot be looking at nature because I cannot represent it. It's so she painted mostly about what it had made her feel and what her remembrance were. Before she passed away, she decided that she wanted to donate everything she owned, all her work, etc., to, yes, steward her legacy, but mostly to support other artists. And this has a lot to do with who she was. During her lifetime, she welcomed a lot of younger artists into her studio. She was very generous. She exchanged with them a lot. She mentioned how she learned from them a lot as well. And I think, her mandate very clearly was from the one artist to the many, and so that's what we have been doing since then. In part of stewarding her legacy, we have an archive, we have a Catalogue Raisonné team who has been working for over 10 years and has many more to go. I'm sure you heard from the first panel that that's complex and long-lasting. We also support exhibitions. There was a wonderful retrospective of hers that started at SF MoMA, went to the Baltimore Museum, then to Fondation Louis Vuitton, and another one that was Monet Mitchell, comparing her to Monet's work. And as I said, this is the year of her centennial. So what we've been doing is supporting museums that hold Mitchells in their collections with conservation grants, and actually inviting them to take advantage this year and exhibit their Mitchells. There's a beautiful map on our website that you can check out and see where all the Mitchells are exhibited around the world near you. And we will have a beautiful exhibition at her gallery in December this year. And as I said, we've been supporting artists, and I would say that has changed along the 30 years that the Foundation has been in existence. We started with simple grants because we just wanted to get some of that money out there to artists' hands. And then with time, we've been really responsive to understanding what the artists' needs are. So since then, we've kind of shifted the one-year grants or the one-time grants to this 5-year fellowship, 60,000 grants over 5 years with a lot of training and support for artists, and basically the building of a community of practice. We select 15 artists every year. I'm going to talk about that more when we go to the questions. Then we have a residency center in New Orleans. Joan Mitchell had no relationship with New Orleans, if you're asking yourselves that. I get that question all the time. Did she live there? No, no, no. Our first ED after Katrina thought that it was really important to bring some support to artists in New Orleans. So we started this center. We support both local artists and past grantees. We have over 1,000 past grantees, so we have a big universe of artists that still keep coming back. We had the 10th anniversary of the center this year with a beautiful exhibition of 40 of our past residents. And it's a place that you can go see and enjoy open studios when you're in New Orleans next. And finally, we have the Creating a Living Legacy program that if you were here in the first panel or session, it got shouted a lot by Helen, which I really appreciate. We have a lot of resources online, workbooks on how to document and archive your work and some legal aspects. It won't be enough ever, because there's so much, and every case is different. And as I see many of you, Yayoi and Chelsea, who we shouted out before, there's so many experts working on this, and we're all trying to do our best. It's case by case, but I would say there's a lot of information there. We're also, earlier this year, we convened a large sector of the field trying to talk a little bit about how do we become from an ecosystem of people who are doing things around artist legacies to a field. How can we expand who we are? How can we map and learn how to navigate all the resources that are out there? And how can we bring more money into this? Because that's what's needed mostly. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about that more later as well. Yeah, and that's me.
Thank you, Solana.
Of course.
Thank you. Can you go next, Mikiko?
Yes. Okay. 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 So, hello everyone. So, thank you so much for the Art Student League team. It's a great honor to be here today. So, my name is Mikiko. I'm a widow of artist KinoSaito. You can see him. And then the first one is he's teaching at the Art Student League. He taught here for 10 years. So, and then maybe some people remember him still. And the right one is Kiko's Soho studio picture. So we still keeping as is, but it's not open to the public yet. We are still figuring out how to use the space. So I'm taking care of the estate of KinoSaito studio. And then also I'm a founder of KinoSaito Art Center. So Kikuo was born 1939 in Tokyo, Japan, and then moved to New York in 1966. So he practiced in color field and lyrical abstractions, working as a studio assistant for Larry Poons and Kenneth Noland and the Helen Frankenthalers. So, and then later, as you see, and then he became an Art Student League. Because, the first time he came to New York, he stepped into the Art Student League and took Larry Poon's class. And then he had a connection with him. So that's a beautiful story. And it's low battery here. So that's his, one of the painting. It's a lot of influence from Helen Frankenthaler. And then acrylic, he painted the acrylic on canvas. And then the other one is 2015, just before he died. And he's getting into the new type of the painting. We are so exciting, but I couldn't see after that. So we purchased, me and Kiko purchased the property, this former St. Patrick's School building in 2014. And then it's supposed to be his studio and the storage, because our Soho studio is getting so packed with a lot of painting, and then it's only like this much we can work on and around. So and then we start renovating little by little by ourselves, but I lost him in 2016. So at his death, I immediately decided to transform this facility to the art center, because I often tell the people, sorry, Kiko told me a long time before. So he told me the human died twice. So the first is the death of the body. And then the second death comes when no one speaks of the person anymore. So when Kik passed away, I made a firm vow that I would not give him second death. So that's my strong will to, okay, so how I keep people talking about Kiko, even, Kiko is not a famous artist. It's not internationally famous, but he spent 50 years to keep making artworks. So that is very important. So I feel that carrying on the artist legacy means is like my board, ensuring that someone remembers artist artwork and the achievement for as long as possible after their death, and creating opportunities to talk about them to others. So that's why I'm try to make this to the art center. So the second one is this is KinoSaito's permanent gallery, and it's a very rustic finish. So I didn't renovate its white cube, but the other two galleries space is one is a very clean white space, and then on the second floor, we have a big space. It's multi-purpose space. You can do gallery as a gallery for exhibitions, and then we can do performance and the concert. So, and then those space and we can use for the performance, because Kiko was also deeply involved to the avant-garde theater with La Mama's founder Ellen Stewart and Jerome Robbins and Robert Wilson. So Bob is sadly passed away recently. It's sad things. So also we have two residence, artist residence space. It's 800 square foot high ceiling and a big white wall. And then this is a very, very important program for us to engage the artists and their activities. And then we are inviting almost 55 artists in the last 4 years, and including 2 art student league instructor. And then another 2 is coming next month. So, and then as a community engagement, we kept the original school classroom, and then providing many art workshop for all ages, and then school tours and the kids workshop. And it's mostly it's a free workshop. So that's what I'm doing right now. So, and then I'm gonna pass to James.
Thank you, Mikiko.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mikiko. Thanks to all my co-panelists. A huge thanks to Phong for convening today's conference. Of course, to Sam and to Michael and the staff here. This is a absolutely resplendent place to have this conversation amongst a community, which I think is a word that's going to come up a lot. But along those lines, actually, I really like knowing my audience first, so I want people to sort of wave their hands around. These are not distinct categories. You may raise your hands more than once. Throw your hand up if you're a practicing artist of any kind. Okay. If you're an arts professional, a writer, a curator, etc. Okay. A student of any kind at any institution. Okay. If you work at an arts institution, a museum, an art school, a gallery, etc. Okay. If you work at an artist foundation or an organization associated with an artist. Okay. We'll let the online folks do theirs, but I think this is I think illustrative. It's sort of clarifying to know who's actually in the room. I'm Jim Thomas. I am the inaugural deputy director at the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation, and my talk today and my conversation is supported by Elizabeth Smith, our inaugural executive director, who's been with the foundation since its establishment in 2013. And a dynamic team of now, my goodness, I believe 17 staff. When I began a little over 3 years ago, I believe I was the 9th hire. So we are in a catalytic phase, as one might say. Phong, you wanted a haiku, so I'll do 7 slides, 5 slides, and 7 slides, right? Is that okay?
Yes.
So I'm confident that some people are familiar with Helen Frankenthaler and some of these images, but I like to begin by grounding everyone in an image of the artist at work. This is a photograph that was taken at the end of the 1960s, very typical of her meditative, solitary, studio-based practice. You see her here soaking and staining canvases, and then one of her most iconic works from the early 1950s, Mountain and Sea. Frankenthaler was born in 1928, which seems to have been a very busy year for a lot of artist parents between Judd, Held, and many others. And I just want to point out that on the other end of that rich life, Frankenthaler passed away in 2011, and the foundation, which was established during her lifetime, became very active in 2013. This, I think, is much more representative of what the foundation looks and feels like now. This is an installation view of a large solo exhibition that the director of our catalog, Resonate, Douglas Streishman, curated. It's a large solo exhibition that the foundation produced in partnership originally with the Fondazione Palazzo Strozzi in Florence. This is an installation view from the iteration of the same show at the Guggenheim Bilbao, currently on view right now. And I think that's emblematic of a lot of what the foundation does on the legacy side, right? We partner with institutions, we produce exhibitions of the work of Frankenthaler and her peers in various permutations, we produce publications, we reissue previous scholarship, we facilitate research about the artist. We also possess, within the scope of the foundation, a massive archive of the artist's papers, her her writings, which are not systematic in any way like Judd's, but her correspondence, et cetera, et cetera. What we do not have is something like, for example, what the Rauschenberg Foundation has, or a legacy building like Lichtenstein. And I note with pleasure that there are a lot of archival and candid photographs, for example, of Frankenthaler with her then husband Robert Motherwell in their matching studios. And the artist has a long and rich life associated with sites including Provincetown, including her origins on the hardscrabble streets of the Upper West Side. We don't need to tend as a foundation to any of those physical sites, but our assets and our responsibilities include a very large collection of artwork and the archives. I also often like to think of Frankenthaler's words and use them as a starting point for conversation. Something I think about deeply is a conversation she held some decades later when she noted, I have a whole series of pictures that are, in a sense, and I think that phrase is important, landscapes. I wouldn't hold the landscape in front of me and translate it more abstractly into the painting. It's not really that literal. But I would, in that American expedient thing you were talking about, think through these ideas in my language. And I think this is a phrase that speaks volumes to the way that Frankenthaler approached her relationship to the built and especially natural environment. I think it's also quippy in the way that you could imagine Rauschenberg saying something like the American expedient way that you talk about things. To descend into Frankenthaler's world is to think about, indeed, those abstract landscapes from the post-war era. It is to think about the atmospheric qualities of her soak-stain works. It is to think about the invocation of a new climate, a work made in the late 1950s that for me resonates with some of our current philanthropic activities, but also at a moment that coincides, say, with Ornette Coleman's The Shape of Jazz to Come and the anticipation of a new era that was about to unfurl. I use these paintings not in my art historian capacity and less about their iconography, but more to kind of point toward some of the tensions, I think, between the questions around the artist and the foundation, between a tangible and an intangible legacy, which I hope we get to today. But we're sitting in an art school after all, so it's important to talk about how one goes from producing exhibitions to thinking about catalogs, raisonné, to get back to the grit of it all, right? And so Frankenthaler is someone who cut her teeth at Bennington College. And I include that not just because we're sitting framed by a lot of lockers and in a site where art making happens, I think we should remember that, but also to note that in the early teens, as the foundation was getting going, one of the first gifts that the Frankenthaler Foundation issued was a naming gift to Frankenthaler's alma mater, Bennington College, which established then the Frankenthaler, it's the Visual Art and Performing Arts Center, which is this cedar shake, large interdisciplinary arts building on the campus at Bennington College in Vermont. What that gift did for the foundation, I believe, is open onto a way to think about philanthropy, to think about, I'm not going to use the word activism, we'll quibble on this word in a bit.
Deal with that too.
We'll get to this. But I think it opens onto the question about how a foundation can do something that is not just about the artist, right? This is not necessarily about Helen Frankenthaler, even though her name is on the building. It's actually about the vitality of the many, many students to come who have and continue to pass through that building. Since then, the foundation has steadily increased its giving to a point where now, at just over a decade, the foundation has issued nearly $60 million, primarily in grants. These have been issued to museums, higher education, and visual arts organizations nationwide. We are fundamentally and mission-bound as a visual arts organization, so we do not fund, for example, theater or musical performance and this kind of thing. And that's what you can't do is as important to remember as what you can do, I think, as it helps to sharpen your focus. A lot of what we do, I see, is reinforcing the entire field, is reinforcing institutional capacity in what I would describe politely as an evolving cultural landscape. I think there are a lot of asterisks by what that might mean. And part of this extends organically from Frankenthaler's legacy, but then moves into many areas that are not explicitly associated with her. And I'll just note that this involves things like providing fellowships at a number of accredited universities for art historians, practicing visual artists. Every year there are a number of Frankenthaler Fellows created by the programs that we've supported. And more recently, I'll just note that some of our most exciting and, I think, bracing work has involved reframing the way that we think about that philanthropic work. And I very much lean into the idea of a trust-based philanthropic model, thinking about our grantees more as partners, and then also thinking about our partners not just as partners, but as really a deeply embedded aspect of this community. And I think two very recent examples of that is the work of our foundation with many others, including some that were represented in this room, to partner with the Getty to support not just artists, but art workers for the LA Fire Relief Fund earlier this year. So museum workers, security guards, gift shop employees at art institutions also were eligible for this kind of fund. And then most recently, we partnered with the Andy Warhol Foundation. Again, 1928, what was going on that year, right? Two artists could not be more different in their style, but two foundations firmly committed to resilience and support for the visual arts, reaching out to these small national organizations that were impacted by the rescission of NEA funds to essentially backfill that. We can get more into that. Of course, I would be remiss without not mentioning the last and final part of this, which is our climate initiative, which is ongoing. For those of you who were waving your hands around when you said you worked at an institution, come see us. Our application cycle will reopen in January, and in a very short précis, the Climate Initiative offers grants to visual arts organizations, to collecting institutions, to non-collecting institutions, to artists associated organizations, to artist residencies, to art schools, to basically incentivize infrastructure upgrades that trend towards green energy. But I want to put an asterisk by that, because a lot of that work has been framed as climate action or sustainability. And yes, on one level, it does things like provide support for this institution and this building to rethink its building envelope. A photo from the Smithsonian, Archives of American Art, the Smithsonian, of these beautiful skylit windows, which the Art Students League is now sort of reactivating as it's thinking about its core master plan in its infrastructure here. We can think about the capacity created for Racing Magpie, a Lakota-led indigenous arts collective in South Dakota that, among visual arts and other community-based services, is reaching a wide community on its reservation. We can think about our dear Kiko and KinoSaito, and how these grants also provide an on-ramp for institutions at an early stage when they say, you know, maybe we're not yet ready to implement this. We need to actually look at our space and understand what it's doing. So these grants are very much intended to happen at different phases of process, not just the realization, but to kind of think through them together. And that thinking through together gets me to my final haiku slide, which is to say a lot of where our thinking now is about aligning philanthropy with programmatic work. And so, for example, just this May, at the Museum of Modern Art, we collaborated with the Tiger Foundation and the Gallery Climate Coalition, another environmentally oriented organization, to convene a half day of climate conversations around the topic of resilience, which is a theme I hope we return to later on. Thank you very much.
That was really comprehensive. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I should mention that to Clifford Ross, her nephew, Helen's nephew, a dear friend, and the board for having thought of hiring Elizabeth Smith to be the director. It's interesting because Elizabeth wrote many letters to, you probably remember the great show, was it 2003 at MoMA when MoMA was still in Queens? Lee Montague, who've been neglected for 28, maybe 30 years, who have not shown since 1973. After that, again, nasty review by Hilton Kramer, who previously the morning attacked Philip Guston, but he's a great writer. And the idea is to have Elizabeth, if she could resurrect it, Lee Montague, she can certainly do the same with Frankenthaler. Because I remember when I came to New York in the late 80s to throughout the 90s, going up to Nodler, almost a kiss of death. It's antiquated. You want to be downtown. So that was a very important thing. And to your point, you know, Mikiko Saito being not as known artist, but kept practicing throughout his entire life, and you help into him not being dead the second death,
Yeah.
which exactly the reason what compelled, believe it or not, Giorgio Vasari to create the 4-volume of the lives and the works of artists, architects, which essentially the grandfather of art history as we know him now. As for Joan Mitchell, who was married to the great Bonnie Rosset, you remember him? The founder of Grow Press, one of the amazing legendary publisher who happened to be a friend, my mentor, who really stuck to his gun, defending freedom of expression when he finally not only got back into this country, he also published Henry Miller, Tropical Cancer, that went to Supreme Court. The rest is history. He won the case, second time. And the brilliant thing about also our friend Dorothy, who actually created the additional program to Studio School, which is called Studio Institute. She chaired that whole initiative until she passed away last year, taking the Studio School model philosophy, teaching artists, or art education, as I mentioned before, pre-K to high school, of underserved community, but not mandate the similar philosophy, but it has to be recreated from different locales across America, which we now spreading across 6 different cities. Roy also very interesting because when I came to New York, you know, in those days, in the late 80s, you can come up to the legendary Leo Castelli. He was there. I remember coming in to see a show of Richard Serra and Bruce Nauman. And I was so perplexed. I was a kid, 20-something years old. And I asked him, I introduced myself, and I say, Mr. Castelli, how do you manage to sell these kind of works? Who buys this stuff? And they say, I can't sell it. I haven't sold any of them for a long time. And I say, how long? Oh, about 12, 14 years. So how do you manage to show them their work? I sell Roy Lichtenstein. And Rauschenberg, a few Rauschenberg, but definitely Roy Lichtenstein and Jasper Johns. So I can take that money and support the one that couldn't sell any works, but I supported them. I give them a monthly stipend, paying the rent, money to live, and for money for materials. So I learned that you can do that. You know, you take thing here to support other things, which is so important to me, which I hope to elaborate more. But first question, very important question, is that how each of your foundation determined the philosophy of your own philanthropy. Is it something that is close to the will of the artist, or is it elaborate slowly over time? And then it's the board decision to decide what is worthy to be supported. Why don't we start with you, Justin?
Okay, at the Lichtenstein Foundation, Dorothy Lichtenstein always wanted to maintain her own philanthropic activities. So she was really adamant that the Lichtenstein Foundation should just be about Roy. So our mission was to produce a catalog raisonné, to make the archives accessible, to further her legacy through different kinds of exhibitions. But we always use that phrase, what would Roy do, as well, but it was really more in terms of his work and his legacy. And so we never really broached further. Like, things came up, like Dorothy would always support exhibitions, So we would make donations to museums here or there, but it wasn't until that we went through this really protracted experience of trying to set up a study center.
Yeah.
And we knew Roy wouldn't have liked it, but we still were enamored with the idea. And it really was a 2-year process of like working with an institution, 2 different institutions, trying to set up this weird kind of 2-location situation. And it was just like at the end of that process, we were just exhausted, and we knew we were just spending money on ourselves and on these other institutions and on staffers, which is great, but it was just a monument that he never wanted. It's like when they rolled out that large architecture design model and they put the brushstroke on top of it, and it just didn't really feel right. So once we moved on with that, we decided to sunset what we were going to do with our assets, and the board really deliberated and started to think about how to use those assets. And there were the traditional things of where to place works, but then we got into the more philanthropic things, and maybe that was because of COVID, where we started doing emergency grants to artists like a lot of the other foundations did. And then we were very interested in the Archives of American Art, so when we promised them their archive, we started talking to them, and it always came about in conversations. We never had formal grant programs because that's not what Dorothy wanted. But through these conversations and meeting different people in their institutions, and things came up. Like, so they would always talk about at the Archives of American Art all these collections that aren't digitized, and how if you don't have collections that are digitized, PhD students are not going to be doing their dissertations on those artists. So we came up with, I think, a $2 million grant or $5 million grant to digitize those collections. And one of the very first awards, which I didn't know this until I was hired by Takaezu Foundation, was that it went to Toshiko Takaezu's collection, which was digitized, and then it was used predominantly to help with the organization of the Noguchi Museum retrospective and the wonderful monograph that they created, and which then again helped the foundation, and her, sadly her art market kind of took off. She got more attention, more exhibitions, and then more grant making. It all kind of came together with that. But we would never have made that grant if it wasn't for the sunsets. So I always like to think about, because it was one of those things where I would be jealous of other foundations for what they were doing for artists, and I always encourage people to move in that direction, to think beyond the artist. And I don't think you have to tie yourself to what the artist would have done, unless the mission is very clearly stated. And with Dorothy, was very clearly that we wanted to focus on other people. But sometimes there's flexibility, and you could evolve with the time. So I talk with other foundations all the time, and I think it's okay to think about the artist in this time period, and we don't ever know what they would think, but to think outside of your original mission, there's always flexibility. So, and then there were other grants. I mentioned this with the consortium in Atlanta, Aspen Institute, and they're still planning a way on how to make those large grants to institutions over the next few years. So,
amazing. Wow. We're going to miss it.
We're
going to miss it.
It's sad to see your staff just slowly leave and people to retire, and what was this like really exciting environment for people and artists. But so, and I keep forgetting to mention this, but it was really important for Roy's studio to go somewhere. And again, we never wanted a museum, he never wanted a museum. And so through our conversations, like after we decided to sunset and we moved on from our previous partners, we started looking at the Whitney, what was in our neighborhood and our community, and it was them. And so we had these conversations with Adam Weinberg about the large study collection that eventually went to them. And he's looking around the studio, he goes, oh, it's a pretty nice building. We're just up the street. The independent study program is, our lease is coming up. I mean, I don't know if it actually happened that way, but it was like the situation through these conversations. Adam's amazing, amazing. So we decided that Dorothy, it was really a gift from the estate to have a center for people and artists that are working and communicating with the world, and that's what they did for 1 year. Until it was suspended.
Amazing too. We should also thank belatedly, of course, again to Dorothy, because I was there when Aggie asked. I don't need that. Whether Aggie could sell masterpiece in further justice, and Dorothy were very much endorsed the idea. So there's many ways to generate philanthropy. What about this? How you
I was thinking about that question. I think there's a what and a how, right? And Joan Mitchell was very clear in her will. She was, the one to support other artists, specifically painters and sculptors, and that was it. And so I think the how that gets enacted has been definitely something that the leadership of the foundation, our board, etc., our staff have had a lot to do and has changed a lot over the years. So as I said before, we started with the painters and sculptures grants, which was like one time only, $25,000, 25 artists a year. At some point, we extended that to early career grants, to youth programs, to emergency and MFA grants, right? And I think with time, what we've always tried to do is be very responsive and have a ear on the ground of what artists are going through and what they need. And even, I was thinking that a perfect example to show that is the CALL program, the Creating a Living Legacy. We started by saying, like, one of our board members, we are very lucky that our board is a working board. We don't fundraise, so we get to have a lot of artists in our board. We have artists at every point of decision making within the organization. And one of them was like, great that we're doing everything for Mitchell's legacy, but what about us? What about the regular artists? What's going to happen to our legacy, and how do we ensure that our work doesn't end up in the dumpster? Like, that's the big phrase. And so initially, it was like, okay, let's start giving grants to artists. And so we started giving, I don't know, I think at the time it was $50,000, which was, in 2007, so a lot more valuable than today. And artists were like, I don't even know where to invest this money, what to do with it, I don't know who to work with, right? And so a lot of it was learning for the artists and for us as an organization. Then we started training legacy specialists and pairing them with the artists over 2 years, working intensely. And at some point we realized, the impact that we're having is so small that how do we take this that we've learned so deeply and share it more broadly? And that's when the workbooks came up. And now we're at a different time, right? And we are once again seeing like, well, actually, yes, workbooks are great and so important, but actually there's need for funding again. There always was, right? But at some point, like, you come back to it. And so I think the how and the questions are more for us as a staff and for our board, of course, to give us support in, but to guide, and as was with the grants and the fellowship, right? Like, at some point, my predecessor, the wonderful Kei Takeda, decided, you know what, it was the moment where everyone was discussing what's it called, the kind of basic income. And so it was like, well, maybe there's something about sustained support, right? That is really important. And we're now, this year is gonna be the last year of the first cohort, the 2021 cohort of our fellowship. We're so interested in seeing what was that impact? Did making it 5 years long really have an impact, even if it's not $150 or $200,000 a year, but how has that sustained support changed the way that this has impacted them? And so I think that's why the what has been very established, the how has been changing with our team.
Super true. Mikiko, how did you get the grant from the Frankenthaler Foundation?
That's a secret. No, it's not a secret. It's it's a little bit difficult to, it's totally opposite from the Joan Mitchell, because Joan Mitchell created the will and then their guide already before she passed away. When Kiko passed away, it was only 3 weeks after we ran into the hospital. So Kiko's painting on the wall, and he's supposed to come back and then to finish. And then we didn't know that we just diagnosed first, like a lung pneumonia. And then, but as a fact, that was a stage 4 lung cancer. And then in hospital 3 weeks, he gone. No will. It's no preparations. We just lost. And that's why we have to figure out how to create our missions. So our mission is picking up the what he loved, what he did. It's like his way of life is we're gonna put the all aspect into the center. So it means like the space has to be welcoming other people, artists and children, and youth. No boundary, any people. So our basic mission is its center has to be rooted the practice of abstract art, but in any form, in any medium. So, and then engaging artists and the audience, and then painting and the performance, and then learning and the play. So it's Kiko's studio. Every time people come visit, and then we are listening music and play and drawing and making something. That was a little community. We are not we are like a family, but not like a brother and a sister and a father. So I really wanted to make an art center based on his own personality. So that became our mission.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Jim?
Well, I have to thank you for that beautiful setup, because I think it relates to many questions about the lives of artists, to say your Vasari, the lives of artists and their own personal connections during their lifetime, and then how legacy can inform on the other end this kind of philanthropic idea, right? So, and I actually should acknowledge Daniel, who I believe was somewhere in the crowd from this morning, talking about this idea of foundations as these funny organisms that have generational flow to them and they evolve, and I think that's what we're hearing from everyone on stage. And I can't underscore that enough, that I believe strongly these organizations shouldn't necessarily be reactive, but at least responsive to the rapidly evolving conditions. And I think that helps to shape ways that you think about, your institutional practice or your philanthropy and your grant making as a function of whatever you're kind of facing at the time. In our particular case, I would say that much of the first decade of the foundation, a lot of that decision making was driven by the board. And at that point, the board was, as you know, many people who were very, very close. Either they were family related to Frankenthaler, or individuals like Michael Hecht, who had lifelong relationships, and so deeply understood the values and what the artist herself prized. So Bennington as an alma mater is an obvious choice, but then expanding out from that, here's an artist who deeply valued the importance of residency programs. So it was a natural choice for the board at that time to reach out to some of the institutions that had supported Frankenthaler during her lifetime, Skowhegan, Yaddo, this kind of thing. Beginning in the 1960s, Frankenthaler was very invested in printmaking, and so worked with many, many different master printers, Kenneth Tyler, Tatjana Grossman, et cetera, So this long history of printmaking studios, the workshops that evolved out of that, became a natural site for thinking about philanthropic support and giving in that regard. Something very interesting happened with the climate initiative. It may not read as apparent, but I would very much see the climate initiative as a direct extension of 2020 and to a proliferation of nonprofit responses to social justice movements, to supporting equity measures in the field. I would also see it as a response to COVID, and that's to say these are risk factors. These are pressures placed upon society and specifically to the art world. What modes of response are appropriate to provide a kind of resilient structure to that? And so the climate initiative is really like seeing climate and the crisis of climate as risk, right? So how do you infuse resilience into that model? To answer your question, though, about like how that works, the climate initiative was the first time that the foundation introduced an open call structure. And I think that's a very important distinction, because suddenly it wasn't the board saying, this is an interesting idea. Open call, anyone in the nation could apply, and there was a technical team of expertise, architecture, engineering, et cetera, who were evaluating these applications and coming back to the board. Now, to bring it full circle, when that began, those kind of felt like two different areas, right? It felt like visual arts happened over here and climate happened over here. So for example, an artist who works as a studio assistant to Frankenthaler commemorates these relationships with a group show. Of course, the foundation is going to lend a painting to that, but it's only natural then, months later, whenever we sit down to the table and talk about this, that we would want to talk about this other sustainability initiative and its relationship. So those two things start to inform one another deeply, and I don't think it's a matter of like this being over here and that being over here. I think it speaks, Solana, to so much of what you're saying about how a community is infused on multiple levels.
But we all know that all charities are non-profit, but not all non-profits are charitable. So that's a very interesting distinction, and I hope that you'll be able to elaborate on that too, because when our large governance, huge foundation who have the means to be able to facilitate and support, as Frankenthaler now, with climate change and other, so-called disaster-related issue, larger issue, there are things that are so immediate to the art communities. You all talk about, you said, Mikiko, about that Saito like dancer, like music, and I'm sure it's all felt very much near to Roy. And of course, Mitchell was married to a publisher and hang out with many writers and poets like Frank O'Hara. And I mean, that's definitely the community that we tend to no longer feasible at the generation that we now know. It seems to me that this is my theory of the end of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War ended with the fall of Saigon in 1975. There was a profound disillusionment among the progressive left, who once was very engaged in civic action and social activism, not just for civil rights movement, but it's coincide with the anti-war in Vietnam. And of course, that gave rise to the women's movement to liberation by the early 70s. But by the fall of Saigon, it seemed like it ended abruptly. And I remember talking to Sylvain Lachinge, who was here as a young philosophy professor at Columbia, who organized a 2 weeks famous panel when all the post-structuralists was brought over, Guy Debord, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, everyone was here. So that gave the rise to post-structuralist movement, where specialization in academic study, higher study, was so intensified. You had to go to graduate school or get a PhD to be a poet. Can I share something that is remarkable? When I remember interviewing Richard Serra, he articulates so beautifully how, having gone to Yale, he gone to undergrad in English literature major at UC Berkeley, and then ended up at Santa Barbara taking a class in his semester, drawing class with a Polish-born immigrant named Howard Bradshaw, who encouraged him to make drawing, and he really liked Richard's drawing, so he encouraged Richard to send a portfolio to Yale, and he got in. It changed his life. And you know what is remarkable? He went there as a painting major. Only after that very summer, it's a remarkable class, Yale. Some people call it jail. 1964, that include Rackstow Down, Chuck Close, Bryce Martin, of course, Nancy Graves, and few others. And he went to Paris on a summer fellowship, and he encountered Brancusi studio. Make a great impression on him because the pedestal and the chord form were all integrated. And then he went to visit Giacometti's studio, and he saw, I think it might be the late 30s, one of the last surrealists Giacometti had made. It's called Woman with Her Throat Cut. It was laying on the floor. Can you imagine Richard went the following year to Rome, as a pretty Rome, and decided he's going to throw all his painting away in the Arno River and started from the scratch again. Coming back to New York, it was the experimental film community. It was the experimental dance community that created a new Richard Serra for him. He experimented making film. He met Jonas Makers. He met Hollis Frampton. He met all the friends, and he began making film. You might seen it, Hand-Catching Lad, one action only. And then what? Start dating John Jonas, went to some crazy performance in Twisted Brown loft where people were jumping off from a loop, like a loop on the window. That dancer, 20 of them falling onto the floor, sidewalk actually, with a stack of mattresses. So think about the experience going to seeing these radical dancer who refused to dance on the stage, who did not feel efficient to carry on that European extension of Martha Graham dance tradition. They insisted to dance on the floor. Think about eliminating the pedestal is as similar as the stage, isn't it? So these are kind of things that I feel so important to recreate that fermentation for younger generation, because we get too caught up in our own specificity. And one thing that I know that Richard was very much the first who came upon to support the rail, because he saw that what we're doing is to bring the community together. I always know the funding comes from visual culture, the made object, painting, sculpture, and so on, have inherent value. But what about the experimental culture and film, dance, poetry? Where are they? They are now being marginalized in higher education. And you have to go to get a PhD in order to even not able to get a job. That's another story. A long. So my next question is a very profound one. Can there be ways in which each of your foundations be flexible, to think out of the visual culture only, to think about supporting, because the experiment culture has been dead for a long time. It's, I mean, that's my great commitment to do the rail, because I know that we can support them, but we need your support too, you know? So I'm sorry, but I'm putting you on the spot. Justin, start with you.
Sure. Yes. I mean, it takes an open-minded board. I mean, this is the best example is just like having these conversations and then me going back and bringing it to my board and having these conversations, bringing people onto the board that are from different backgrounds. So a lot of times it's just an insular kind of group of people that knew the artists. Like we're talking about how boards and foundations change over time, and a lot of them get more professional. You bring on more people. I think the Lichtenstein board is about 12, 13 people now. Takaezu is much smaller. I think it's 6, but it's completely changed over. But to bring in those new ideas, to throw those ideas out there. But it would take a lot of effort because, you know, there's one thing that we don't do at the Lichtenstein Foundation. And recently I went to an event and was really impressed by, I think it was Derek Forjor, the artist. He works with high school students in Memphis, his summer internship program. And I fell in love with it, just listening to him talk about it, you know. So I brought that idea back to one board member, and they kind of said, yeah, we'll think about it. Yeah, okay. And it might go away. Yeah. But maybe not, you know, maybe that percolates and it becomes an idea. So, I mean, how do you get those ideas? You just have to be open-minded, have people that have these conversations, bring them back to people in your institutions. I mean, anything is possible as long as you're open-minded and flexible, but there's a lot of fear in boards. Like, you know, we were talking about, this is slightly off topic, but I was talking to a foundation who was not here, and they were talking about things that they fund, and because of the Trump administration's crackdown on like DEI initiatives, they were maybe afraid to like go in that direction for this term. The program we were working on, which was a fellowship program with the Studio Institute, their art internship program, and it had ties to the Aspen Institute.
That's right, yeah.
And it was a beautiful program. We participated in it for 3 years, and we really brought in students from outside the usual framework.
Yeah.
And I was hiring people that weren't, so in my department at Lichtenstein was archives. I was hiring non-archivists, which I would never do. You know, there's so many archivists that are,
Yeah.
you know, you could get jobs to that have degrees, but it's not to say that they performed better, but they brought a different energy. It was a different kind of person that you brought into your institution. Now, that 3-year program ended because the funding ended. And we just had this goodbye call this week, and there was this like uncertainty about whether it would continue. And I hadn't talked to the Aspen folks or the Studio Institute folks. I didn't really have these conversations, and maybe I'll follow up. But I don't know if they like went to their partners and asked for more funding to extend the program. I don't know what the circumstances were for that. But maybe it's fear, you know, out of the institution, and maybe we should combat that. But anyway, that kind of veered off topic.
Can you say it twice to them next time?
Say it twice?
Yeah.
Sure.
Great.
I'll follow up.
Thank you.
I will.
Well, let's leap all the way over there to Jim, and we'll walk backward.
There was a lot in your observation. Which question do you want? Do you want about arts funding? Do you want about the value of experimentation?
Why not both? Art funding and other disciplines.
I'd like to begin with maybe a somewhat controversial take.
Yeah.
In 1989, at the height of the culture wars, Helen Frankenthaler, an artist who's not known for her writings, wrote what might be described as a challenging text. She wrote an op-ed to the New York Times. You can look it up.
Yeah.
It's called "Have We Created an Arts Monster?" This text would live in something of quiet infamy and would unfortunately characterize an aspect of the artist's reputation for some time. At the time, Frankenthaler was actually on the council for the NEA. She was sitting within the entity of the NEA. And her article, and keep in mind this is the height of the culture wars,
Yeah.
and so she cites rather disparagingly the work by some of the greatest hits from that time, people like Andres Serrano, among others. And when one reacts to that op-ed at that time, it comes across as a rather negative read, right? I think that the artist in that moment, frankly, got lost in the weeds of taste, right? She actually made an argument about what kinds of art should be championed. But what is very interesting is to go back and read that right now, like in 2025, is very different. Because when you read it now, you actually read it as an artist who is saying, taste aside, I believe in the importance of the NEA, and this is an institution that needs to be perpetuated, and that Congress should not be in the business of saying what happens with this, right?
Yeah.
And so it's for me, that's a fascinating case study of a text that is like a problematic text for an artist in their own lifetime, but then now due to a radically different political and social context, upon rereading it, it actually has a very different valence. How fitting then that we would partner with the Andy Warhol Foundation. There's one photograph of Frankenthaler and Warhol together. It's a great photo. That we would partner with that foundation to essentially backfill money that the NEA had rescinded. And I mention that because there's no, I don't know, some market logic or return on investment, or these are going to turn into amazing arts institutions or even artists. It's actually about believing in the vitality of that cultural force, right? That, I believe you used the word social capital earlier, right?
Yes,
It's recognizing that these centers of artistic production, some of which are children's book festivals and pop-up film festivals and mural arts programs, et cetera, is that they form part of that fabric of it's like sort of like we talk about food deserts. These are art deserts. There are many in red states. There are many in rural areas. Mm-hmm. And so the belief is actually just like creating a vital force for that artistic energy to flow somewhere is the thing to worry about, not the quality that goes with it. And I think that speaks to your question about experimentation, is don't be fussy, take measured risks so that you can actually offer a platform to others to take wild risks within that kind of space. I think that's a model to think about.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was legendary, I'll bet, for sure. Thank you, Jim. Mikiko?
Yes.
What did you have to say about that issue?
About the art funding?
Or supporting a greater, broader discipline rather than...
Yeah, we just celebrating our 4th year anniversary. It's I'm a baby organization. And then actually we are not the art foundation. We are 501c3 public charitable organization. It means our organization has to exist with a public charity.
Yes.
So it means that the estate cannot put the money over the 30% in the 5 years. So it's like a friends, corporate, and grant, and federal grant, everything has to be formed to cover our expense or all the activity. So everything is a challenge. It's, of course, it's the Andy Warhol Foundations, and it's still we are challenging. I just submitted the last week. It's 3rd time, so I'm not sure what's happening. And then it's so simple. It's only 3 pages, no visual image. So you have to explain what you are believing or what you are going to do. So it's for us, it's like, okay, so this painting is beautiful, and this exhibition is beautiful, our space is beautiful. It's not like that. That what we have to show our core, what you want to do, and then why you need to exist, why you need a fund. So those kind of language is very difficult to us to, of course, we try many times in last 3 years, and then NEA funding was, we are expecting to submit this year, but it couldn't because Trump admin changed the rules, and then you need 5 years, the activities. And we hired a grant writer, and then that's big help, but many grant writers, some are not fit with us, but this time it's quite a fit with us, and she's working very good. So, and then that's why we send a letter to the Helen Frankenthaler, and then we got it. So, and then Nesca Foundation also is very helpful, and then it's language. It's very important. But of course, artists or me or the regular people doesn't know what language we should use. So I think it's the funding challenge is who you talk to, and then how you share your wish.
Can I ask a follow-up to you?
Yeah.
So I'm reminded, when I've visited the site of Planck, there's this beautiful generosity of spirit.
Yes.
The feeling of Kiko having taught in this building for so long.
Yeah.
And that feels so much a part of the residency program.
Yes.
When you do the visits there, it's actually very experimental. There was a sound artist there was a painter. It didn't feel rigidly defined.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm hearing in Phong's question and also for you is, these are all platforms. Like a foundation can be a lot of different things, an artist organization can be things. In your case, like the asset is this amazing building where artists can come and take those kinds of risks. And I guess I'm curious, when you think about the year ahead for those residencies, obviously you have some partnerships, but do you go in thinking, oh, this year we'll have 3 painters and 2 sound artists? Or is it, do you really just let that go where it takes you in a way?
Yeah, it's an open door.
Yeah.
So we are still like a time of seeding. So I don't know what's gonna have a flowers and then what's gonna have a fruits. So it's a seeding time. It's a very important. That's why we, we are not like a luxury restaurant. So we cannot serve everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what I have, space and artist history and legacy, and then not much fund, but we just open space, and then other artists and audience and other foundations just to bring the ideas, and then I need to listen, I need to watch, I need to look carefully, but those energy has to be, it's like a small community, like a house. So that's why maybe he feel like welcoming.
Yeah.
So that's a very important for us. That's an asset for us. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Solana?
And if I might segue, because I was going to say something similar, not in the form of a question, but I feel like even your partnerships are with experimental organizations, because that's how Kikuo expressed himself, right?
expanding.
He was very experimental. And I was going to say something similar. When I was interviewing for this position, one of my first things, I was coming from the shed, I was running the open call there, which was all about experimental and emerging artists who had never done a commission. And so I was like, the first thing that I'm going to do when I get to Joan Mitchell is going to tell them that we need to expand, not just painters and sculptors. And of course, and actually our board, one of our board members reached out to me on the side and was like, can we change this? And the lawyer said no. And I was like, okay. And after 3 years in this position, what I've realized is, because we do take a very expansive understanding of painting and sculpture, but most importantly, because today artists are multidisciplinary. Every artist we work with has a performing practice or a sound practice or a writing practice. They're so, again, genre bending and multidisciplinary, that the way that we are collaborating with them is that. The other piece is that they're, to your point, Jim, they're in such remote places. They're not in usual arts capital. So supporting that artist is supporting that broader community, because they are bringing all these lessons learned, all of that they, engage in, etc. They bring all these topics to the community of artists, and so that expands, right? We were one of the organizations who has also supported the Getty Fund for the LA fires. We've found little loopholes around the concept of emergency. At the time with Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, I think emergency has been something that we've considered mostly in New York and New Orleans, which are our communities, but more broadly. And I think, but also say that in terms of experimentation, I think the artists that we're supporting are experimental. And although it sounds, so traditional and archaic to say painting and sculpture, it's much broader. And if you look at, at least the last 5 cohorts of selected artists, it's amazingly broad. And then in New Orleans for the residency, we were actually able to say, well, it's local artists. So it doesn't, there are writers, there are poets, musicians, there's all these other, because it's a residency and it's a little different, but yeah.
It's interesting. Jim, when was the John Elderfield show of Frankenthaler?
Oh my goodness. Let's see, what year was the first publication?
2016?
86. Then the book comes out a few years later. Yeah, so it was kind of at the peak of that cultural culture wars moment that we were describing earlier, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, a moment of sort of late modernism as the 80s gives way to the 90s, and that work, it's funny to think about where like that kind of abstract practice was sitting at that moment.
Yeah. No, just because Solana mentioned about the gender bending, the crossover discipline, that is a rebellious occurrence, only happened, I would say, since the Cold War ended, 91. So
Always.
it's not before.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
slow,
of course.
gradual building up because a lot of young people are frustrated being labeled.
Yeah.
They don't want to deal
Yeah.
with it, you know?
Yeah.
I think that there's a certain kind of anger towards it, actually. So I think it's real, you know? It's interesting. I think it's good for all of the community, creative community. That's why I wanted to end with one more question. We open up because we're running late. Am I right? What time do we have here? 3:40. Holy cow!
Is
All
it-
right.
is-
So
I believe
Ve-
it's,
very
is it
quick.
Tuesday yet? I think it's
Yeah?
Tuesday now. Is it right?
okay.
Still.
Two more questions I
Okay,
squeeze
yeah.
in. The next question is, what are your views of artist residency in general? You know, there have been traditional artist residency, been around forever, since the 20s and 30s, some are even earlier like Yaro and McDowell. And the last 2-3 decades, there's much more broader, longer residential stay, allowing people, whether in the city or outside the city, upstate, across the country. There's a multitude of amazing artist residencies being created. And I wanted to ask each of you what your view and whether the foundation relate or do anything with those residencies. I know the famous one in New Orleans was created by Carolyn way back from the beginning when she was a board member, founding lawyer of the board. That was her initiative. But in generally speaking, what is your view about that?
I'll be very concise.
Sure.
I mean, I want to cede the time to others, but I'll just say, in the case of Helen Frankenthaler, residencies were absolutely essential for the artist to carve the space out in her own life and practice, to be at remove in some way, to rethink generative new phases of her career. That belief is carried directly through the values and ideals of the foundation in our ongoing support in various ways of those kinds of residencies. I would also extend that to an even more expanded model. I mean, think about the model of the sabbatical, which is cherished in academic traditions, right? I mean, I think the bottom line is find ways to support people to have the autonomy and the agency to have the expanse to unfurl and do that creative work. Whether it's a federal grant to do so, whether it's a month in Maine, whether it's forming a virtual community that meets weekly, it's like, find a way to support that, full stop.
Mm-hmm. Solana, anything?
Oh, I think it's the most wonderful setting for creativity, for exchange, for community building. I think that one of the challenges we see a lot is artists right now, they tend to have a second job, they tend to be caretakers. It's a hard proposition for them to leave their city, their apartment for 3 months to enjoy. So it's very important to have, you know, kind of site-specific residencies where you can go and really, you know, have your sabbatical. It's important to have local residencies when you can be still in your life, etc., but have a studio, a free studio. I think it's a wonderful resource. And then in our case, we also think a lot about, you know, that exchange, the exchange of artists who are not from New Orleans with the city and the local community beyond, right, like the studio itself. What are some learnings that they can have? A lot of what we've been working recently and in this convening that we were talking about earlier, where we started discussing how can we as a field start supporting work around legacy stewardship for artists who are not Frankenthaler or Warhol or Mitchell or residencies are such a place where every artist with an MFA, without an MFA, with, you know, with recognition, with representation, without, can be at it's such a space to reach and to converse with these artists that I feel like they're a jewel in this. And I see more and more artist-led residencies. Artists who decide to leave the city and to bring open space for their peers. I think, nothing to.
Julie Moretto with Denniston Hill,
Yeah.
Dan Colon with Sky High Farm. Justin, any observation on that?
I mean, I understand the power of residencies. Lichtenstein, we never really funded any residency programs, but of course, the Takaezu Foundation and her working with so many apprentices and teaching being so very important to her, that we are engaging in the next year into funding small residency programs based on locations. And especially we're looking at Hawaii, where there's there's a group of people that really don't have access to these programs, and we're looking at one for next year. But we're very small, we're starting small, and then we're gonna
And for
hopefully
foundation
graduate.
staffers in Hawaii. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Phong,
Jim,
can I add
Jim.
one observation? When we had the calls with the Warhol Foundation to talk about funding the NEA projects, we were coming together and we were talking about how can we fund 100 organizations, right?
Yeah.
And we had a call with a national organization, Grant Makers in the Arts. And they got together, fabulous organization, many small orgs, and they got together and said, we're gonna get together, we're gonna try to fund 2. And I think the point is philanthropy and giving, to return to all of this, or the residency model is you can be an artist and you have a spare bedroom and you're I'm going to run a residency program. You can decide that you're going to set up a structured donor fund with $500 a year, and it will make a difference to someone. I think it's about wielding that, right?
That's a great.
That's terrific.
Yeah. No, it's like artist in residence program is. I think it's a great opportunity for artists to. Our residency is no restrictions. It's a 4 weeks residency. It's a quite isolated space, and it's a living studio. So huge studio, and then have a sleeping loft and the kitchen. So and then some artists that doesn't come out for 5 days, and some artists that get lost sometimes. But it's kind of we give the opportunity to artist face to yourself and your artwork 24 hours. Because many, New York City, it's artist studios, the situation is getting worse and worse. So no big space, no big wall, and then people has to, so many distractions with daily job and family matters and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's great opportunity to just be in a white space, and what are you gonna do, and what you are doing right now, and what do you wanna do, you wanna create. But it's also in the community. It's a beautiful chance to look at the open studio, meet the artist. It's like a panda bear in a zoo. So and because all the Westchester people can see the artwork in a museum, but it's not much chance to meet artists and see the creating process. So that's a huge education to the community.
Yeah.
And how long is your residency last?
4 weeks to 6 weeks, and we pay a little stipends. And then you can bring anybody. You can bring a colleague, you can bring a partner, you can bring family, and then we at the open studio, there's anything you can do. You can do music, you can do performance, you can show the painting, you can show your previous work. It's whole opportunity I try to give them.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's terrific. One of the great joy in so many boys sit on is Shop World Lantern studio program. When I joined, it was called Marie War Shop. It was based in Tribeca in 2005. And a year later, we couldn't pay the triple rent. So then one of the board members, Chuck Close, who had known David Warlantes, because David Warlantes' business partner was a man named Jeff Bayer, who was married to William Bailey's daughter, but also partner with Brancato, actually, of the great legendary biker gallery. So when you think of Klaus Curtis and Jeff Bayer, you take their first 3 letters of the last name, that's biker. So that was very ecstatic when Chuck proposed the idea to meet David. Then Irving Sandler and I, Rob Stewart, and Janet Fish, and Raxtor, I think a few more of that original group came and proposed to talk to David and Jane. So they built the 17th studio specifically for the residency, which will be 1 year long. So after Sandy, we proposed the idea to merge the two together. And I remember Irving Sandler squeezed my back and asked me to deliver the ask. I basically say to both David and Jane that if we were to bring the two together, then your name will be immortalized, equivalent of the Medici family. And it was a magical move because we no longer had to pay rent. So that model now has been extended to Munira Foundation at Mana Contemporary. 1 year full free rent is so essential to the artists because the tour at the end of the year, especially when you pay so much money to go to graduate school, fancy graduate school, you get torture. You know, you have to survive that torturous criticism, and you could no longer make the art when you left. You need to do all kinds of art jobs to forget about it, just the way I described about Richard Serra having left jail, remember? You have to overcome. Take 2-3 years to overcome. And I think when you go through a whole full year residency, you begin to make work beginning again. And to the tail end, you make breakthrough. So many great artists have gone there. Sarah Z, Tara Donovan, recently Luz Fortino, Jordan Castell, you name it, hundreds of them. And it's so essential. My last question now is simple. What's it again? Before we break for question, is really about more, okay, you know, one thing I learned about Aggie Gunn, she never gave away money, ever, to the nonprofit or foundation she supported until she paid a site visit. Meet the founder, meet the staff, feel the aura of the place. It's intimate philanthropy. It's not bureaucratic, remove. In other words, some big foundations tend to hire a big machine who torture you with paperwork. You would fill out application, it would take like months. May as well get a PhD. It's torturous, you know? And then you take a quick note, say, please try again next year. And that will repeat. So what are your views on that? I need to go to the bathroom so badly. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, can you go with your
microphone?
It was always very personal for Lichtenstein because we didn't have a formal grant program. So we would always give based on a connection. And when we did the Ponce Museum as well in Puerto Rico, because we had a relationship with them and we'd done an exhibition a few years before, so we were just immediately connected. And so it was always based on relationships. Mm-hmm. And so we were usually intimately involved with the institutions that we work with and that we grant money to because we weren't formally doing it. But
that sounds great. We give money to artists, and so. But our process is interesting because the way we work is it's by nomination. And so we do every year kind of curate, for saying something, a list of nominators. We are very interested in having nominators in every single state as much as possible. State, territory, all of it. We have artists from like Puerto Rico, Alaska, Hawaii, all around the country. And we ask every nominator to nominate 2 artists and to say why, and to give a statement that will actually be reviewed by the panel. And what I'll say is that one of the questions, we have like different criteria. It's around artistic vision, it's around impact, or what the expected impact of the award is. But also there's a question, because the community building aspect of the program is so important for us, that community of practice and those relationships between the artists are going to be kind of the key and what they're going to take with them forever and ever. And we do believe through, in-person convenings and the workshops and the exchanges, they do build real friendships and trust relationships. And we keep saying, like, there's no blueprint to being an artist, right? Like, so they are their best advisors, as many experts that we hire and bring. And so what I'll say is that question around, and the third question is, how do they expect to benefit from being in this community? And that's a question that we've incorporated recently, and we feel that has a lot of power and a lot of information on how they already interact with their local communities, but how they want to interact with this national community. So we don't meet them in advance, we meet them right after. Once they get announced, we have a whole welcoming process with an intake form and an intake conversation, and we start the relationship there. Mikiko.
No, I don't have a quick question, because I'm our organization is just like we are submitters, right?
But your residents, do you meet them before, or they just come to you?
Yeah, residency program is like we are mostly based in invitation basis, but because it's first 3 years, we are just seeking what's the best way to do. And then open call, we just started last year. So, but Artist in Residence program, we have many partnership with other institutions, like Pratt Institute, Yale University, the Student League, and La Mama Experimental Theater has a performing program. So, and then it's kind of like still mixing, but it's all, you need the people who introduce to us, and then you need the friends to talk about your art very well. Yeah. So, and then I want to hear that, and then that's the opportunities are coming up.
I think when we began this panel, Justin was clean shaven and now has a full I feel like I've been up here a very long time. Great. I'll just simply say, in my work at the foundation and in our shared work, I believe very strongly there's a method to this. There's a whole world out there called trust-based philanthropy, and it's very much about the idea that you regard your grantees as partners rather than it's sort of coming from above, and that you learn as much from them, and those relationships evolve over longer periods of time. I think a good combination of open call and relationship building is a really healthy model to extend that, and I'm happy to talk about it more at greater length.
Yep.
Sam.
Terrific, yes.
This is great.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to leave to Sam to say a few words, because I think we spoke enough of you.
Yes, we've come to the end of our time. As you'll notice, we've missed the Q&A period, but lucky for you all, we'll be here with drinks until about 6:30, so we encourage you to continue the conversation casually over a glass of wine, Prosecco. For the time being, first, please join me in thanking our fantastic panelists and moderator.
You're wonderful.
And then join me again in also thanking our fantastic sponsors, the Blue Rider Group at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, Nordstrom, Scami Construction, Wovo, and of course, the Brooklyn Rail. And as I said before, we'd also love it if you would celebrate with us the launch of 150 Stories, our anthology published on the occasion of the 150th anniversary of the Art Students League. It'll start in half an hour, again, right here in this room. Join us for a glass of wine, and we hope to continue the conversation, and thank you all again for coming.